Brown says, get that India. Big boy.
Maika Sivo! Call an ambulance! Maybe call a priest! Oh, what a shot! What a shot! Campbell killer!
Hello and welcome back to, well, potentially the final instant reaction podcast of the NRL season. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as 4020. Joining me in what is potentially the last NRL instant reaction podcast, and I say potentially because the Eels sprung perhaps the upset of the season, 60s. But yeah, you're joining me as my good friend and co-host of the show. It's usually I feel like this when we're trying to compose ourselves after a real ugly loss, a la what we saw against Brisbane a couple of weeks ago. I don't know what to make of what we saw tonight.
Well, mate, I'll tell you what I made of that. I made of that an 18-point win over the Panthers, which I'm going to take any day of the week. Obviously, there's the frustration involved. Where was that the last few weeks? Where's that been in the back half of the season because of the effort plays, the positivity that was obvious there right from the start? The mindset was there. Everything that we spoke about in the preview that we were concerned that Parramatta was lacking. Self-belief, positivity, it was there in spades, and we bashed them all over the park.
Yeah, it was the most on-brand Parramatta-style game we've seen in maybe months. I know we had a nice run through the mid-portion of the season where we were playing some great football, but since that loss to the Warriors where it's all been downhill, this is by far the most iconic Parramatta-type victory we've had.
Well, I messaged you early in the game when we had Ryan Madison bomb that try, and I said to you, watch what happens from here.
Groundhog Day. It was literally the Roosters script from the week before. Eels jump out to the early lead. Will Penasini gets the ball dislodged as he tries to ground the ball via Lindsay Collins. And yeah, it was literally the same thing here. Dejan Arce busts the line, puts Madison over, but there was a microscopic knock on there with Madison not quite getting the ball down with the chasers behind him. And you're like, oh my God, it's going to happen again. It's literally the same game.
Yeah, and Penrith, I think it was 2 sets later, got their try to pull it back to 6-4. But from there, I mean, I shouldn't have been that negative because not at any stage had the Eels demonstrated that their heads weren't screwed on for this game. So I think it was a bit unfair for me to be thinking that. I guess I'm coloured by what we've seen in the last month to 6 weeks of football. But before we get into the details, mate, a shout out to our sponsors, Big Swing Golf Northmead, Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta. And also just a quick shout out while I've got the opportunity because Parramatta Leagues Club's got their amalgamation with Dural Country Club, and they've got a function on at Dural Country Club tomorrow, kicking off at 5 o'clock. So if you're in the Hills District and you're a Leagues Club member or Dural Country Club member, get up there because they've got the official ceremony. But just as importantly, they've got Muggo and Lids there. John Muggle and David Lydiard, so you can get there and catch up with a couple of Eels legends.
A couple of high-quality characters right there. Fantastic players, even better blokes.
Yep, absolutely. And given that they've been past guests and very enjoyable guests to have on the tip sheet in our post-match show in Parramatta Leagues Club, I had to give it a mention that they're going to be there. So, if you're up in the Hills District and you got a chance to get up there, check out the facilities up at Dural Country Club and also catch up with a couple of legends. So, yes, mate, let's get on with having a look at this match because getting 2 wins over the Panthers in the regular season.
Yeah, the sweep.
Oh, it's, it is so frustrating, isn't it, that when we can see the best of the Eels like this, and much the same as last year, 2 wins in the regular season over the Panthers. I know we're not qualified for finals football this year, and that's a whole story in itself. Something to be greatly disappointed about, but it's so odd that we play the type of football during the regular season that upsets the Panthers. We couldn't reproduce it in the finals last year, or rather they were able to lift to a completely different level. But they really don't enjoy playing against Parramatta in the regular season. I don't know why. I think it is that physicality, mate. I really do. I think we upset them in their game in that regard. And if we get on top of them early, they find it hard to wrest that back. And
we also can attack it at odd angles too. We can play conventional attacking structures, but also slip out of structure, but in a structure in and of itself. And that really challenges a defensive line that prides itself on the integrity it has in wrapping up the ball carrier. We certainly attack it in a couple of different ways, and that troubles them. And it's no doubt that they've gotten the big wins in the finals, which is obviously incredibly frustrating, culminating in last year's grand final. But we play a brand of football that definitely matches up to them, and they are a dynasty team. Like, they are one of the best teams of the modern era, and potentially going to go down as an all-time team if they win this year. But the Eels, yeah. I mean, I think Vossi was on commentary saying that the Panthers have lost just 16 games since the beginning of 2020, which is essentially the start of their premiership run. They won in 21, they won in 22, they went to the grand final in 2020. That's when it all started coming together. Of those 16 games, 5 of them have come to Parramatta. So we've literally handed them a third of all their defeats since then, which is pretty crazy.
And I think some of their other defeats were when they've rested players. Or had players stood down during Origin games. So that's really a mark of their consistency during those years, and also I guess that frustrating part with Parramatta, that the team that's the juggernaut team of the 2020s is a team that we're probably we have had the best record against. So anyway, mate, there's some interesting stats that I know you're about to share with our listeners, because I think some of these stats add extra merit to the Eels' victory tonight.
Yeah, so Eels 32-18, obviously, winners on the scoreboard, and that was a scoreboard that probably reflects a little bit kindly on the Panthers, given that they scored a brace of late tries in the 75th and 77th minute. Their try scorers, Tyrone Peachey, Nathan Cleary, Liam Martin and Tom Jenkins. Bad night for Cleary off the tee, though. 1 from 4, very uncharacteristic. Eels, they had 6 try scorers. Well, 6 tries scored, only 2 try scorers, to phrase that better, in their 32 points. Maika Sivo breaking his longest career drought of tries in emphatic fashion, bagging a double hattie with the 4 tries. Quinton Gutherson falling 1 short of his own hat-trick there, which was denied by him cashing out early with what looked to be a knee injury that apparently isn't too bad per post-match reports, but that's the 6 tries scored there for the Eels. Guffo, 3 from 6, but geez, his 3 misses were all literally a bee's appendage away from going in. He was striking them sweetly off the tee. He also tacked on a penalty goal. That brings the Eels to the 32 points. But, yeah, possession, not in the favour of the blue and gold. Panthers with 54% of the ball there, 60s. They were over plus 5 minutes in time of possession. Both teams completing really well, 81% for the Panthers, 78% for the Eels. So good rates on both sides there. But it's not tracked on NRL.com, but Fox Sports were sort of keeping tally for the game. And I've got to say, by the end of the game, that the Panthers must have had 50-plus tackles inside 20 for on the Parramatta Eels goal line.
It was, again, a mark of the effort on effort from the Eels players. Number of times that the Panthers were also held up over the line.
Mm-hmm.
And
including the unfortunate incident of Jerome Luai, who, I don't like a lot of what Luai does, but I certainly don't wish him injury like that. So that was a shame.
It almost felt like what happened with Lane with his elbow, didn't it? The arm getting in that awkward position and a player falling on top of it.
Yeah, it's like one of those football injuries where Bryce Cartwright makes a tremendous play, but Luai, in the act of trying to force his way over the line to score, got that elbow, the non-ball carrying arm down to try and give himself the leverage to reach forwards, and it just got all wrong. Like, just awful luck there. And I know that the commentators were trying to be optimistic, but looking at the mechanics of that injury, I would be stunned if he's back this year. That looked like a dislocated elbow plus serious ligament damage or tendon damage, and maybe even like a fracture on the socket.
Yeah, it was particularly nasty, and I don't know. Maybe what did they say? It's normally 3 to 6 weeks. So would you suggest that it's going to be at the higher end of that? We'll have you 40-20 replacement NRL physio.
I mean, I am speculating very loosely here, but like I said, I'll maybe the grand final, or even maybe the grand final qualifier, because what's that still? We still got one more week to play, so it's about 5 weeks out still, 4 or 5 weeks out.
If they get that far.
If they get that far, because, Penrith, obviously an outstanding team, but all it takes is, a bad week and a bad week one game in the elimination bracket. So, yeah, definitely one to watch there. But in terms of the attacking stats, more runs and run meters for the Panthers. Eels with more line breaks, which is the first time in a while it feels like 60s. But they've also, both teams up at mid-40 tackle breaks, 46 for the Panthers, 47 for the Eels. Play the ball speeds, Penrith really fast tonight, 3.19 seconds. And it actually felt like the Eels were competing in the ruck too. So, yeah, credit to the Penrith team. They played the ball really rapidly. But I
think Parramatta about 3 or 4 weeks ago abandoned the clean ruck.
Yes, but even in spite of that, the Panthers just fighting for the play the ball really well. But Parramatta's play the ball speed also very healthy, 3.47. Eels had about 12 offloads in the first half and only tacked on one more, it looks like. So winning the offload battle 13-12. Both teams, defensive tackle rate's not great. I think both coaches would point to that as it being an area to tidy up, although obviously Brad Arthur would have been loving the intent, like you said, 60s, those goal line stands. But Penrith down at 82% effective tackle rate. Parramatta at 85.5, so a few percentage points up on the Panthers, but you never see Penrith down that low.
No, and I think for a start, those offloads and line breaks in the first half, that really, I think, I didn't check the stats at halftime, but I reckon that the effectiveness with the Panthers tackling would have been very, very low in that first 40 minutes.
9 errors apiece. Then you got 3 penalties conceded by the Eels. They won a penalty count, 60s, in their last game of the season. 4 penalties conceded by the Panthers, so +1 to the Eels there. But 2 ruck infringements for the Parramatta Eels. No one put on report from the Eels, but the young winger McLean was put on report, and I would argue 60s, and I know that mechanically when there's a professional foul, it's either a sin bin or a penalty try, but when it's foul play in the act of scoring a try, why was it not a sin bin and a potential 8-point try? Because that was a swinging arm to the face. If that was in the...
Well, when the review was done of the tackle, it was swinging arm, wasn't it? Was the terminology connecting with force to the head?
Yes, which is literally the template for a sin bin this year.
Yeah.
And like I said, when it's a professional foul, when you've deliberately done something to impede someone in the act of scoring, that isn't a foul, isn't foul play, it's one or the other. It is either a sin bin or a penalty try. And you can argue the merits of whether it should be one or both. I don't mind that. That's a different conversation. But this is foul play. And if that was anywhere else in the field, that's 10 minutes in the sin bin. So why is it not a sin bin for this one? Yeah, we got the 8-point try, or potential 8-point try. We only kicked the one goal. But that's a sin bin. Like that is just the long and short of it. That was a sin bin, and it did not go into the sin bin. In terms of player stats, though, 60s, let's celebrate what we saw from the Parramatta Eels. Big games from Gutho and Sivo, obviously, for the try scoring. Both around 130 metres on the ground from 13 carries apiece. 5 tackle breaks for Gutho, 9 for Sivo. I think the Eels might have to patent the time machine that they built this week, 60s, in order to get 2019 Sivo back. Because that's
I think that's let's come back to Sivo's performance after you finish the stats there, mate.
Dillbags, just shy of 100 metres, but very good in both the capacity of halfback and fullback. Had to go in there once Quinton Gutherson succumbed to that knee injury. I thought Junior Barlow was outstanding. He went for 20 runs and nearly 180 metres. No tackle breaks to the big man, but he got a few offloads away. What's he credit? He's only credited for 1, but he had some passes, must have been deemed before contact. And he got through 19 tackles with just the 1 miss, so a nice balanced workload for the big man. Solid contributions, and yes, he had the botch try, but Maddo, Hopgood, Cardi, Offengahi, except for that one error. Big Woody. And I got to say, Woody looked in great shape, 60s. He had that last run in the game, and when he was standing at the tackle, he just looked really trim and looking like he might have a big preseason. So to build into next year. But yeah, just great contributions across the board from the Parramatta Eels. That's how you beat the Penrith Panthers, isn't it? It takes a concerted team effort, and we saw that tonight.
Yeah. It wasn't it a thing of beauty to have that Penrith crowd just absolutely silenced? I mean, sitting there without, I mean, it's their worst nightmare is having just an overwhelming loss against the Eels.
Yeah, the season sweep, the first ever Thursday night football sellout as well. They packed in at Blue Bet, Penrith Park, whatever you want to call it. Ham, our mutual associate, has a much stronger term for it, which I'm probably not going to use on this podcast. But yeah, they were baying for every call to go their way, and yeah, they got a few. The Eels got some as well, but they that game did not go to script for them. The Eels rattled the cage early, and when they pushed back, the Eels stood back up and delivered the big swing, the big counter blow. So,
yeah, a quick question for you. I mean, it was raised as a topic during the coverage.
Mm-hmm.
How much does this loss impact the Panthers? Now, they're going to finish top two. They're deservedly at the top of the table. You can't take anything away from a club that performs so consistently over so many seasons and are going for a three-peat. There has to be respect for that. But you've got the injury concern coming out of it with Luai. You had a couple of players that were a bit knocked up and therefore rested coming into the game. Does Cleary now rest players as he intended to do next week and risk going into the finals on the back of consecutive losses? And maybe, I don't know, maybe it
and $100 and something $1,000 short in the pockets too for the team.
Yeah, look, I don't think they give a damn about the money that's there for the minor premiership. It's pathetic. Let's face it. You deserve far more to be minor premiers. That's a reward for. I mean, that the minor premiership is basically what the English Premier League.
That's right. It's
wins their titles, determine
first
their
past the
titles.
post. It's a more. I love the drama of sudden death football, of the elimination final series, but first past the post is a truer reflection of consistency across the weight of an entire season, and the team that was the best team across 20, and in other codes a lot more games, 60 if it's in baseball. Well, they've also got elimination series too, which doesn't really count, but yeah, in EPL you play a lot more games, and yeah, the team that's the best for 6 months, 7 months wins, not the team that got hot for 4 games.
We'll mark that down as a potential discussion point in our weekly podcast between now and during the final series. But just as a reminder to listeners, we will continue the podcast because there we have the NRLW team, we potentially have the Flegg team going, and there's always plenty to talk about that's happening in the NRL. So whilst it might not be a 3 times a week podcast because there won't be instant reactions if there's no matches to do an instant reaction on, we will have our podcast, and I think that's a worthwhile topic. What is the suitable reward for winning the minor premiership? But anyway, would someone like Cleary just stick to his gun? I think I have the answer to this, and I think you probably do too. But will he stick to his plan, stick to his guns, and just rest players next week, therefore basically gifting the Cowboys a top 8 spot? You see, I reckon if they play if they play as a team that has most of the big name stars rested, and it's essentially a New South Wales Cup team, I would suggest that the Cowboys could put a score on them.
Yeah, the Cowboys got plenty of strike, and the Penrith Cup team isn't as hot as it has been in recent years. Like, it's still a good side, but it's not an incredible side.
Yeah, exactly. They've got some promising players in there, but they haven't got players who, I guess, are literally at first grade standard, where they were the benchmark in, well, last year they were the benchmark in 4 grades, winning the SG Ball, Flegg, New South Wales Cup and NRL. And this year you see them, well, they didn't win the SG Ball. They're, I think, sitting around about 4th in Flegg. I can't remember where they're sitting in New South Wales Cup, but they're certainly not the dominant team in New South Wales Cup.
They are entering the round in 6, so they're actually outside the finals as we enter the final round. And the Eels have a chance to play sport. I mean, especially if they end up calling up players. Oh, sorry, that's this week. The Eels can play spoilers this week in that regard and actually kick him out of the finals. Win for the Parramatta, and I think they're on equal points with the Seagulls, the Blacktown Workers Eagles. So there's some for and against. There's a 2 points of for and against between them. So, or a magnitude of loss is also another factor in this one. But yeah, Eels win on the weekend. There's a very good chance that the Panthers aren't playing finals football like the Eels.
So what's your call? What will Cleary do?
I think that Cleary, and he's won 2 titles in a row. His eye is always going to be on the big prize, and a loss next week in the NRL doesn't mean too much. Second place v first place, it's some nice pocket change for the team if they get them on a premiership. And like you said, it's not really a reward reflective of what should be, nearly as prestigious as winning the premiership, really. But yeah, if resting players like he did last year for the finals, and the year before as well, he's done it, is the formula that gets the best results in the run to the big dance, then he's going to rest them regardless. I don't think the minor premiership weighs that heavily on his mind. In regards to the other sort of question you posed in terms of what does a loss mean for the Panthers, maybe in a football sense, I think the Panthers would, and again, I know that they've beaten us in the finals, but we've played them incredibly tight in 2021, where I'd argue we should have won. And then most recently, they got the 2 wins in the final series in 2022. But if the Eels were in the final series, I think that would maybe weigh something on their mind. They would actually have some consideration saying, this team, they can still match it with us. I think the only team that really can play the brand of football that we can play against Penrith is maybe the Broncos, with who, have some rapid speed on the edges and some big forwards that can generate second phase play. But I don't think their forwards can generate the kind of second phase play that we do at our best against Penrith. That's not to say that the Broncos can't beat the Panthers with their own brand of football, but yeah, I think the Panthers are happy to see the back of us, and even though they would obviously be confident meeting us in the final still, but we are definitely one of those teams that, or maybe the only teams that has consistently been a thorn in their side. Hence that 5 wins out of their 16 losses in the regular season since 2020.
So my next question to you is, this final game from the Eels, is it indicative of what the Eels should have been capable of in the back half of the season, or was it simply that the pressure was off, it allowed for the mindset to be maybe not as negative? Like, the previous weeks, I think the mindset was maybe like, oh, geez, I hope we can win. Oh, we can we get through it? Can we do this? So they were asking questions of themselves. Whereas I think tonight they were going out there and saying, you know what, we can beat this team. No dramas, let's go out there and get the job done.
Yeah, I will say full credit to the boys, full credit to the team. Those rugby league cliches there. They absolutely proved me wrong in my evaluation coming into this game. Obviously, I tipped a big loss. I thought that we weren't going to be able to compete in multiple phases and in multiple facets, but it looks like they found a way, and I don't know if it's because the pressure's off or whatnot, because I would have argued that the pressure being off would have been a bigger factor towards them not competing. They found a way to hit the reset button this week. I don't know what they did. I don't know what was said. Certain players, like we mentioned with the 2019 Sivo reference, looked like they'd been shot out of a cannon in this game. The team were turning up in numbers. There was aggression in defense. They were piling in on the goal line to hold up Panthers at every turn. I know Penrith ended up scoring 4 tries, but one of them was off an actual NFL pass that the toucher was right in line with. And I'm going to talk about that later because I'm going to start demanding that we stop paying touchies if they're not going to do their jobs. Do your jobs.
Well, I think that's going to come in with the "you cannot be serious" stinger. I just have that
jobs.
feeling.
But Liam Martin scored a cheap one with Dejan Arce, who had actually been quite good the entirety of that game, but he got a little bit sloppy in defense there. And the first try Penrith scored was a really well constructed one. That was like actually just a very good backline move that pulled us down for numbers down our right edge. It wasn't like we did anything awful. So we defended really well. We were really hungry. We saw Jermaine Hopgood diving on a ball, putting his body on the line from a short dropout. We saw guys, just getting in attack and defense. Like just the sort of hunger we hadn't seen for a while. And like I said, I don't know how they did it because they had nothing to play for this week. Yeah, mathematically, we're still a chance of making the finals. That was on the line. We need 2 results to go away, including an absolute trouncing of the South Sydney Rabbitohs by the Roosters. But before that, we need the Roosters to lose to the Tigers this week. So if we'd managed to put on another 20, 30 points against the Panthers tonight, it would have been very interesting. That would have made for a very interesting weekend, I'll tell you that. If we'd managed to move the points differential target to around 30 points for what the Roosters had to get instead of I think it's about 60 right now, that would have made for a very interesting next weekend, assuming that the Tigers got the job done this week. But yeah, they just turned up, and like I said, full credit to them because they absolutely proved me wrong.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things for me at training was listening to BA give the instructions about the defence, especially down there in the red zone, and about which players have certain jobs and how they need to move off the line. And it was good to see the players actually following the instructions and the defensive structure to the T.
Yeah, because we've seen in the past that you've intimated that the game plan hasn't always been executed the way it's been practiced in training, and we saw that tonight. Yeah. Like they went out there and it was all effort and all execution, and you get those two E's together, and that generally means excellence.
Yeah, and it really was, as I said, like tonight, the effort on effort, the focus, it was one. I believe this game was one between the ears by the Eels, because, as I said, the focus was there, but the self-belief was obviously there, and they just didn't waver from what they were doing. And I know that BA, the instruction that you heard at halftime was that he said, don't go out there protecting the lead. I want to see, keep going with the offloads, keep playing positive football. And it was a bit tighter from our perspective. But I think that became the nature of the game because we were certainly having to come off our line really deep throughout the second half. And I think it was that second half was just as much about the measure of our defence and the resolve over 80 minutes than it was for, trying to put a big score on the Panthers. So a lot to be positive about there. Now, I mentioned it before. I want to throw that name, Maika Sivo, to you because we saw 4 tries there. You referenced it as being 2019 Sivo, which it probably was. He looked like a man possessed, especially in that first half. Do you think he's had some sort of a rocket delivered?
Something has been said. There is no way that comes out unprompted, unprovoked. And, maybe it was a very honest conversation because of how good he can be versus, what he's sort of been drudging out every week. He scored some tries in that game, and while they were all short range, only a handful select elite wingers can score in the game. The one where he got the high shot, where I think it was Brian To'o who got him on the ankles, I'm pretty certain To'o stops 95% of NRL wingers if that tackle. But he had the power to get through it. We saw some quality kick returns. He was running smarter, not just harder. He found the gap. We saw some real, not just we even when his form's been trending down, we've seen some aggression in defense. That's why he literally got a 4-game suspension. He jams in aggressively. He commits hard to the jam. We saw that tonight with the target zone being in the right place. We also saw him doubling up from Maika twice in that game.
Yeah, that is we just don't see that. There was
one lazy Sivo moment right at the end when there was the chase through on a kick, and I think the ball might have gone to ground, and in a bit of a mad scramble, and I thought he was a little bit lazy there, but that was about the only thing that I could be critical of with him in this game. See, the remarkable thing is that we on TCT, we just don't see replies to posts there, but we get a lot of direct messages sent to us, and so many people had been contacting us and sending messages. The Eels need to get rid of Sivo. The Eels need, and last week in our reaction podcast,
yeah, we had a frank conversation about it. If you had to cut bait with one player from your back line to free up cap space, it was 100% Maika Sivo.
Yeah, well, it was 100% Maika because he was one of the people that's on big money. Well,
relatively,
he's on decent coin where it would make a difference if another club was to take him. So his name came up because he hadn't been producing first grade form. The Maika Sivo that we saw tonight would never come up in discussions.
No. And not only that, and I'm saying this with the caveat, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying he's back. I realize completely this is an outlier. This is an outlier game as it stands. But it highlighted what a difference 2019 Maika Sivo, that sort of caliber of winger, makes to this team. The ability to start and finish sets with some real impetus, up against the best team in the competition. And I know Penrith weren't full strength. Neither were the Parramatta Eels. No Mitchell Moses, on top of some other guys too. But a quality winger, just one of them, because Sean Russell did a good job there too. But he can't impact the game the way Maika Sivo can right now. And maybe Sean's going to develop into a plus NRL winger still. He's got speed, finesse, and some good skills. But Maika has a niche that no one else in this team can fill. With the ability to be an absolute powerhouse, inside both 20s. And wow, just illuminating to see how much of a difference it can make for this team to have him back in that sort of form, even if it was only for 80 minutes.
Now, the performances that stood out, I mean, statistically, I don't think the numbers tell the full story. I thought the last 2 weeks we've seen a very good Dylan Brown as a halfback, and even later tonight as a fullback.
I mean, the play he put on for the first try, I mean, who else does that in the NRL? Joey Manu? That I can see him making that sort of play, to be able to stretch a defense from a scrum like that and still get a ridiculous one-handed flick offload away. We saw a player that was playing, it felt like, 3 or 4 hats, halfback, 5'8", fullback. And maybe it's food for thought for BA and Trent Barrett too. For maybe not just him, but also Mitchell Moses, the ability to use either half as a fullback, not in the conventional sense. Like, don't stick him at fullback for 80 minutes. But in the red zone, you can get him the way the Roosters used to use Luke Keary when he still had all of his speed and the ability to go into contact without fear of ending his career, to strip an edge for numbers and create some unique attacking looks. Because that was a very, very good game from Dill. And even he actually had probably a season high missed tackle count of 7, but that was obviously balanced between fullback, halfback, and then where else he was patching in the goal line at that point.
Yeah. So I thought that was an interesting talking point. But now let's talk about Junior off the bench.
That you talk about food for thought. I in a game where I thought Reg was a bit quiet, Penrith obviously really went after him in the early exchanges, and I thought Woody was pretty good. His compliment to Reg, Junior came on and really just kept the tempo pumping, didn't he? He wasn't trying to force silly offloads. He was running strong. He actually saved a couple of kicks as well, by the way. There was one, he got back a grubber kick on the in goals, and then there was a chip kick that he got back and caught. So some great situational awareness from the big fella, some really good impact. We mentioned his numbers before, but 180 metres or close enough. I think it was 19 tackles for 1 missed, 0 ineffective. So he had himself a whale of a game. And look, we've mentioned a few times, it's been a long 2 years for Junior Barlow. I don't think anyone in the NRL has played as many games of him since the start of 2022, between NRL, State of Origin, and repping in the World Cup for Samoa. He's barely missed a game, and you could see the fatigue took a toll on him this year. And it's one of those difficult things for the coaching staff, because you can't shut him down because he is so integral to this team, and you try and load manage him, but in a way it only sort of minimises the damage. But to his credit, and I know the season was lost at that point, but he turned it on the last few weeks. I think he's finished of all the Eels in the team in the sort of that bad streak. Maybe he can hold his head up among the highest.
Yeah, and but do you think someone like Junior is, as he gets into his senior years, because we're talking about a bloke that's going to be in his 30s, is coming off the bench going to be his answer?
It's definitely a consideration, like a strong consideration moving forwards. Obviously, if Junior can go as a starting prop, you want him there, because if he's still got the juice to be an elite starting prop, and we'll wait and see what this preseason bears in terms of recuperative and restorative sort of impact. But if he can go as a starting prop, you keep him there. But he's got the sort of game that can transition wonderfully, I think, to an impact role off the bench. You strip back his minutes, you give him more of a license to be aggressive, running the ball, and also being a distributor or an offloader. And defensively, we know that we've always worked Junior in a way that we don't push him for big defensive workloads. And that's not to say that he hasn't made made 30 plus tackles in plenty of games, but if you watch the disparity between him and some of the other forwards, Junior's consistently in sort of like the low 20s. Other guys are 30 plus. So yeah, he could absolutely, if opportunity or necessity or just form and the sort of timeline of his career push him towards that. I think it's a not necessarily a bad thing for both him and the team.
Now, in terms of the overall team, what is a win like this in the final game of the year, when they're not going to qualify for finals football, apart from probably causing more frustration than anything else for Eels fans? I mean, look, we've got to enjoy the win. The players have to enjoy the win, because that's what football's about. However, we'll acknowledge that there's going to be frustration from supporters with that, because the first question is, where's that been in the last few weeks? But all that aside, you've got a team that, coming into the pre-season, we know that there are still holes in the roster. But does a performance like that say to you that the core of the team is still relatively strong, and that with luck, with injuries or suspensions, or maybe better discipline so there's not suspensions, but with a bit of luck in the season, that the team can still play finals football next year? Or do we straight out say, look, this was a one-off, the Panthers were off, it means nothing, a game like this? And again, we talked about self-belief. They went into the match with a bit of self-belief. You'd have to think the Eels. Does it help their mindset coming into the pre-season, or will it mean nothing to them by the time the pre-season or next year rolls around? What's your take on what the match and the win actually means?
Well, we had a couple of somber conversations in the wake of recent losses. Obviously, getting humiliated by Brisbane, backing that up into the loss against the Roosters, where we talked about bridging years and whatnot. And I, if I recall correctly, because I know that this is my stance, as it has been my stance since the entire period, even with the degree of pessimism that's been there for both of us. And I do believe I articulated, if I recall correctly, but was that with a full-strength roster next year, I am still confident we're absolutely top 8 and maybe even borderline top 4 contenders. My question was, A, like you mentioned, with the depth in the back line, whether we've hit those sort of recruitment goals, and B, again, feeling like a need for a lot of stars to line up for us to not make the finals, but to be a legitimate threat in the big games at the end of the season. We need to be fully healthy. We need other teams to maybe be a bit banged up. And sometimes that happens. You absolutely see premierships from teams that had stars align, went on good runs, and that could still be a factor for the Eels, but I don't want that to be a factor for Parramatta. That's why I was so frustrated in that conversation was I want to be more in control of our destiny. I wanted to have the players on the roster that could take us to a final. And, I think, and as much as people accuse us of being optimistic, I think maybe we have undersold how impacted this roster has been. I know you've written about it at great length, but how impacted this roster has been by injuries and suspension. And the fact that Quint might be able to back us up for this on Tuesday or whenever we do the podcast next week. But I'm reasonably confident we haven't had our full strength team all year, 1 to 17.
I would almost guarantee that hasn't been the case. I think.
Simply just because of Sean Lane's ins and outs with the roster, lining up with a couple other injuries, I am reasonably confident we have not had our 1 to 17 locked in, especially when you consider some breakout players like Woody and whatnot who also had a long-term layoff. If we get the 1 to 17 back next year, and if Maika Sivo is, he doesn't have to play like this every week, right? Obviously, I would love him to. But if he is, even remotely capable of producing that on some sort of consistent basis, suddenly you're talking top four again. And obviously from there, you're an outside chance at the premiership. I've got those two concerns heading into next year, being depth in the back line, like you've been harping on about 60s, because right now it is not where it needs to be. And then the other side being that X-factor player they've been banging on about recruiting but haven't been able to find to be the difference maker when the games are much closer. And right now, this team, this was a reminder to them, to supporters, to the NRL, that they can mix it with the best in the competition, even under adversity.
Yeah, look, I know that there's probably going to be more supporters out there being negative about a win against the Panthers tonight than probably what there should be. It's the nature of the beast because there's the feelings about the overall season.
Yeah, you squandered a run to the finals. One more win, two more wins, you're guaranteed. One more win, you're a great chance of making it. Absolutely. When you look back, there was a lot of milk spilt this year. Like the Eels, they botched a lot of chances, and there were some tough losses, some bad luck, some games they lost where they definitely shouldn't have. So, they're all factors. And when they do the review, whether it's just the football crew doing their review of the players, a debrief, there's always an exit sort of a process with our players and stuff. Or if there's a bigger club review, maybe there will be, I don't know. There's absolutely going to be a lot of stuff they're going to say, well, you guys you botched it, you messed up there. But equally a big factor is the stuff out of our control, the injuries, not the suspensions really, because that is something that you can control by being more disciplined. And that is a brutal stat. The fact that we doubled up on number 2 in the competition for time missed, and we missed a full season's worth of one player's full season's worth of games at the end, pretty much 60s. They were massive factors. And again, speaking of those factors, it's a credit to the team that without Mitchell Moses, the player that more than any other has carried us to victory against the Panthers, on the back of his ability to flip the field with his kicking game, to organise the team and to spark some serious attacking raids against them, they found a way to win without him. And I think that does bode well for next year. But one good win, obviously, one little swallow does not a summer make. And the big priority for me is getting fit and healthy for the preseason into round 1. And I think from this game, the only concern really is the captain, Quinton Gutherson, who, again, absolutely heroic. I mean, he was outstanding. There were some plays he made in the first half in that flurry where he was weaving through the defensive line, floating passes through defenders to find Maika Sivo, popping up everywhere. Obviously, he was not fully fit. Got banged up, I think, competing for a ball that was bouncing dead off a Will Penasini kick at one point, and that sort of spiraled into the second half where he ended up getting taken out. And look, I don't want to put Voss and Ennis on blast too much, but because I don't think they realised the significance of the injury at the time. Like, it wasn't a season ender. Well, it was a season ender, you know what I mean, but it wasn't like that sort of season ender. But he was clearly in a bit of discomfort, and they were going on about the old Datsun trying to get a push start, and he's trying to bang it in the place and whatnot. It felt a little bit distasteful for me.
Yep. So, mate, with regard to the Eels and what
might mean for next season as far as I'm concerned. The way that I look at it is there has to be an element of change within the roster. And what I mean by that is we've got older players. Like I think there's something like 8 to 10 of the likely 17, first choice 17 at this stage, who will be turn 30 years or older or 29 years or older in next year, like during the calendar year next year. Obviously, all spread out different times of the season. So there might be someone now who's 28, and I'm saying, well, they're turning 30 next year because their birthday is going to come in the next month or two, where they'll turn 29 and then they'll turn 30 next year. But it's still the fact that you're looking at a whole lot of players who are 29, 30 or older. In fact, most of them 30 or older. I think there's only one who turns 29 next year. So it's a significant part of the roster. We have to start to see some of the young players being blooded next year. I don't have any doubts about that. And we have seen that there's been players who've made their debut over the last few years, their NRL debut and their Parramatta debut, but there has to be change there. We have to hit that player market and add players. Now, we may not be able to add that difference maker. If we don't add the difference maker, I don't know that we will be anything like a premiership contender. I think we need someone significant, and I think obviously it's going to be a backline player that is going to.
That comes back to the conversation we had, Spark from NRL 360. Like, I would love Ice back, but you cannot go and sign Ice unless you're confident you can resolve the backline issue as well.
Yeah, and those rumours are swirling around about Isaiah Papali'i. How much credence there is to it, we don't know, but they're not going away. And as we said, we wouldn't knock back Ice coming, but we also need to be very definite about recruitment targets that will make a significant change to what the Eels are capable of. And that basically means we need greater depth in the backs. We have to be able to provide options for a start. I mean, before we even think about a strike player, we need options. Like if there's injuries, obviously you need options, but you also need options for drop in form.
That's right.
Drop in form.
You need people nipping at the heels of your incumbents. If you do have a slump like we saw from Maika Sivo, you need to have someone that can credibly replace him, not only as a threat to light a fire for Maika, but just for the team's sake itself. You need a guy you can throw in there and be confident that he's going to come in and do the job.
Yep. Now, mate, you were champing at the bit to say something about those flag carrying officials. I feel a stinger coming on.
You can't be serious, man. You cannot be serious.
I'm done with Touchy 60s. Just get rid of him. Like, I've got gripes with the main official in the bunker, but they've got tough jobs. They've got to watch a lot of stuff. Touchies literally have like 2 jobs, offside and forward passes, and they help out with some other stuff too. But they've got 2 callings, and they don't do either of them very well. We saw the Panthers score was it their final try, the Jenkins try? I'm pretty certain it was their last try, wasn't it? Yeah, it was, the 77th minute. That was an actual NFL pass, and the commentators were praising the Panthers and Cleary for the great backline move. It was passed about 4 meters before the line, and he caught it on the line. And if you're not going to do your job, don't get paid. Just get rid of him.
No, there was not the slightest thing that was mentioned about that. Now, look, there's probably not too much in the way of controversy during the match, although there was an interesting call with Sean Russell where he wanted to get that ball out into the field of play.
And Gutherson blew up about it, and the tackle was complete, and it got punched out. That's a penalty.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, the bunker ruled that he dropped the ball some way, somehow, before the ball was punched out. He clearly had possession the entire time. That tackle was complete. That was a penalty. But they gave the Panthers a scrum instead of a try. So I suppose that's a silver lining for the Parramatta Eels there. But like I said, I got gripes with the main officials in the bunker too, and my hierarchy of issues right now is touchies, bunker, and by a far distant third the main officials. Like I complain on the podcast about them, but like I always say, they've got a tough job, and the bunker is frustrating because they were literally brought in under the banner of bringing more consistent decisions to the game, and in the course of like the same day with the same bunker crew, they get the same situation done differently, and that's obviously a big issue in my book and for most fans, I imagine. But yeah, touchies just, I don't understand. We have players offside all the time that aren't being called out. We have forward passes, and you cop borderline calls, like the forward passes that are, marginal and whatnot, and whether they're called or not called. Yeah, it's frustrating when it happens, but whatever. But when there is an actual NFL pass out there and they miss it, and they were standing in line, like you can catch a replay, they were there, they just let it go.
Now, what I want to know is, can I recruit you to the flag boy wake up call brigade next year? Can I get you on board with the wake up flag boy calls throughout the game?
I don't know if you can, 60s, because I'm usually just like standing up in disbelief doing the John Travolta from Pulp Fiction sort of thing, looking around like what the hell just happened? Like, come on. But yeah, in my mind though, maybe I'll be a sneaky recruit to the wake up flag boy movement because or flag girl, given we've got plenty of ladies running around the touchlines too. We're equal opportunity referee complaining machine, 60s.
Very, very true. Now, I think we're probably at the point of our final instant reaction podcast of the year to give our 3-2-1s for this game.
This is a game where I think, again, a lot of players could be in the mix for points or should be in the mix for points. But my 3, and I feel like even though he didn't play the full game, I think he typified how the Eels got up for this one. And I think you remove him from this equation, and even with a lot of other outstanding performances, the Eels don't win this one. And I think it's the captain, Gutherson, who was just an absolute warrior out there.
Yeah, look, it's hard to go past him, but for the sake of balance and for the sake of where the game was won tonight, I'm going to go for Junior Polo because co-captain, I thought he played a captain's knock out there, and we saw the running game from Junior tonight, 175 run meters. 67 post-contact meters. There was a statement that was made through the middle against the Panthers, and whilst the Panthers surged back to an extent during the second half, they were just finding it so hard to make the type of line breaks and the sort of impact that they're used to making every week against all opposition teams. And I think Junior went a long way towards what was achieved out there tonight.
I would give Junior my 2 normally, and he will get my 1 point, so spoilers there. But there's a select handful of people on the internet who seem to think that TCT wield incredibly influential powers at the club, and we don't use them responsibly with criticism. So under that mandate, and in order to keep Maika Sivo ticking along with our incredible powers, I'm going to give him the 2 points as a big thumbs up for what he needs to do next year.
Well, I think my 2-point call is fairly easy because I steered away from him for the 3 points to go to the co-captain. It's impossible to go past Gutho for the 2 points. It was a game. It was an effort that was just full of determination.
Yeah, just absolute warrior doesn't even really begin to describe how much of a fighter he is out there on the field. We've talked about in the past, if he had another yard of pace, another meter of pace, he would legitimately be the best fullback in the competition. That is the only limiting factor on his game, and whether it was, it's hard to tell now like how fast he was prior to the injuries. I don't think he ever had out and out speed, but I think he still was a good, half a step quicker. But Guff, and maybe maybe he's not the player he is without those injuries. Maybe that's what, spurned him to become the most, hard-working, well-rounded fullback in the game to make up for it. But yeah, he's had a couple of games this season where you can argue maybe he was a bit off, but games like this are a reminder of just how outstanding a player he is, even with a lack of elite speed.
Yeah. Now you've already flagged that Junior is getting your 1 point. My 1 point could just as easily go to Maika Sivo as you gave him the 2 points.
Well, when Maika Sivo doesn't have a big year next year, you're going to know it's TCT's fault.
And look, I feel like the 4 tries, you have to get something. You have to get a point, and especially as you said, maybe there's a couple of those tries that another winger doesn't score. Now, all that said, if I think about could the team have won without a particular player, and I look at tonight, and that certainly applies to Junior Paulo. It applies to Clint Gutherson, and I think it also applies to Dylan Brown. I don't think we win without Dylan Brown. And for that reason, and that reason only, I have to give him a point. He has to figure in the 3-2-1. I think what we saw tonight and what we saw last week from Dylan Brown was mature performances. There was everything about what he did seemed measured and precise. And even, I think he even copped a tough call where they ruled that pass of his was forward, where I think the Panthers
there was Panthers knock on, and I think Russell scooped it up and was looking to play on. Dill is such a fascinating player to evaluate because he is still so young, and you just know that there's still so much more to unlock in his game. We see, even with as dominant as he is right now, I don't think he is near the full package yet. I think in terms of his long kicking game, there's stuff to work on, and I think just in terms of building around him in our the way we play the ball around him, I think the Eels definitely have some things they can consider because he breaks tackles pretty much every run. He is constantly freeing up that arm, and it just feels like we need guys being a little bit more cognizant of that ability to free up the arms. But yeah, big game from him tonight, and I certainly can't knock you for giving him a point.
Yeah, and he's an interesting study because, and this has come up rather sneakily, I think. We've seen him be the less dominant 5'8" in games. We've seen him now have to step up as a halfback. We've seen the Eels flirt with him as a centre. We've seen him during games jump in to play dummy half. And I'm not talking about how halves will go to the dummy half role after a long kick. I'm talking about where, the dummy half's gone off and Dylan's had to fill in for the remainder of the game. Tonight, for the first time, we saw him go to fullback. And I've argued against people who've suggested that he has the capacity to play fullback simply because I've said he doesn't have the focus or the communication to be a natural fullback. But,
is this going where I think it is? Are we talking about an off-season switch?
No, I'm not. I'm not suggesting it. What I'm suggesting is that his utility value is maybe something that has snuck up and
100%
caught people by surprise.
He could play in the back row, like that. I think you could literally play Dill in any position in the team outside of 8 and 10. Even at 13, you could play him as like a ball playing lock. And I tell you what, you put him into one of those two prop positions, he'll probably give it everything he's got.
Well, what would you have expected tonight? I expected Sean Russell
to go to fullback.
Go back there.
Russell the fullback, Simonson to wing, and then one of the back rows, Cartwright or Madison to go to centres, and then plug in Sean Lane into the edge. Right, that would have been. Yeah. I know it's a lot of positions to swap, and therefore doing the way the Eels did was a little bit more. It was like one or two positions less impacted. But maybe maybe it was Brad Arthur saying, "Hang on, let's see what we got here." I don't know.
I don't know either. I mean, it was interesting to see it happen. As I said, I think it's further highlighted Dylan's utility value. And how would you rank how he went tonight at fullback?
At fullback, he had a couple of tough moments under some really testing attacking kicks from Cleary, who was obviously one of the best, if not the best in the game at it. But it wasn't like, I mean, the one I thought he falconed was actually Cleary knocking it back, so that wasn't on deal. But he made a couple of great tackles, and you saw him hustling, bowing out from dummy half to get back to fullback and racing across field to make the plays. And in terms of offensive restrictions, I don't think they were only on him. He played a very, very similar role, and it comes back to the idea I proposed at the start, where maybe you can talk about Dylan playing fullback in a more serious capacity, but I think in terms of in the red zone or even in the opposition half, I would love to see us use Moses and Dylan either in that sort of role where maybe you plug Gutherson into a first or second receiver, and you let the two halves who have the best pace in the team get into it in the fullback position.
Well, there are no restrictions as to where any player can bob up in the modern game. It's not like the old rugby league where you used to have, your halfback, your 5'8" would play outside your halfback, your inside centre, your outside centre. Looking for that sort of structure. We've already seen that the rules of or the expectations around certain positions have changed, where we've seen the lock roll evolve. I mean, many years ago, back in the early 90s, we saw the dummy half roll change, where the dummy half became part of what's now called the spine, and some of the elite players in the game are your dummy halves, where once the scrum stopped being contested, you were essentially looking at a dummy half who might have a good workload in terms of being able to tackle, but now you want a strike weapon in some way you want someone who can read the game in the dummy half. They're some of the most important players in the team. So rugby league has evolved. So what you're saying just there in that, okay, let's think outside the box in terms of how the attack is structured and where certain players are positioned. Hey, we see front rowers standing out at 5'8" or centre off scrums. So why wouldn't there be, a rethink around what's going to happen?
Because really, the entire process of attacking is about creating mismatches. You're trying to spot up guys in advantageous positions, right? You're trying to disadvantage the defense by creating numbers, creating overlaps, or giving guys that can beat someone else in a one-on-one, two-on-two situation the best looks possible. And I feel like guys like Moses and Dylan are our best opportunists at creating those sort of looks for Will Penasini, for Bailey Simonson, for our edge back rows and wingers. So I think it's something that warrants a look, because it doesn't even require, like we're talking about, it's not like it's a radical paradigm shift defensively and offensively. You're not asking Dylan or Moses to learn how to cover fullback properly, to defend 40-20s and 20-40s, which Guffo did in this game. Actually, there was a 20-40 attempt that he easily snuffed out. I think there's definitely some space to explore there.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see what next year has in store, because guess what? That's what we're going to be literally having to focus on moving forward is next year.
We still have, hang on, where is the NRL schedule here? We have to wait until Saturday at the very earliest to be officially out of the race for the finals. But if the Tigers do win, then we get the cling for hope against hope that the Roosters put on. Where is the points differential? Yeah, exactly 61 points of points differential. So, it's going to happen, guys. Just trust. But yeah, obviously the Eels season is 99.9999% done. And we now focus on what's moving forwards. In the positives, though, we do have some live football to cover still. We're going to farewell Jordan Rankin on Saturday, and the Jersey Flegg are looking to book a spot in the finals of a win over Penrith, while also asking the Canberra Raiders to upset the Melbourne Storm, although upset in a loose term. It's not like they're rank outsiders. They're 2 wins behind the Storm. They're not exactly a terrible team. But yeah, on top of that, we've got the NRLW playing another, 4 weeks, including this week, of competition. So we've got plenty of Parramatta football coming up, especially if the Jersey Flegg can manage to get into the finals. And while they'll be sneaking in on the competition ladder, I don't think there's any doubt they can make some noise if they get in their 60s.
Yeah, it's a game that I'm really looking forward to watching tomorrow. Not tomorrow, Saturday. Although we're not, as we record this, we're not too far away from being able to say tomorrow.
Yeah,
It's recorded late at night.
Very late at night, by virtue of being a Thursday night primetime game and a hearty discussion afterwards. But yeah, nice way to end the season, even if it's, obviously academic. And maybe it does move the needle for me a little bit, 60s. I think maybe it is a reminder of how much this team still has in the tank when everyone's fit or even close to fit, against even the best in the competition. But, the players need to prove next year that this wasn't a one and done sort of situation. They can maintain the fire throughout the course of the entire season.
Yeah, absolutely. So once again, thank you to our sponsors, Big Swing Golf, Northmead, and also Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan, and Parramatta. Might I also say that I would anticipate that there is going to be a grades that's going up this week. If you checked out Goal's preview, as he said, he was partway through the grades last week, and it just became a bit too much for him to finish off. Yeah. Which was understandable. So I think we are going to. Well, I think our readers who missed the grades will see the grades appear within the next day or two. Please stick with the coverage that we'll continue to provide on the Cumberland Throw. If you're listening to this on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe, like, all the sorts of things that help us with our metrics. It would be much appreciated. And thank you to all our listeners. Thank you for sticking with us in what has been a strange year, some good times, some not so good times. That's generally the way it is for Parramatta Eels supporters. So thank you. Thank you, John, for your fine work, and which we will continue to see, and people continue to be able to hear as we continue the podcast through the final series, and also whenever there is news to be heard throughout the off-season and pre-season. And as I always say, go you mighty Eels.